Thank you everyone for joining another Indivisible Illinois Virus-Free Voting Illinois Facebook live stream event. We're here every Thursday until Election Day, November 3rd. Indivisibles have been focused on bringing true equality to all in Illinois since we formed our groups in 2017. And in the last 3 years, we've engaged in electoral work, issue-driven advocacy, and organizing in all communities as part of Indivisible's mission. And over the years, we're proud to endorse Rep. Lauren Underwood, Sean Casten, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and we also endorsed Mayor Lightfoot in her 2019 campaign. This year, we also endorsed Marie Newman, Danny Brzezowski, and Ray Lindsay alongside Joe Biden. We're working every day to make sure that they're elected. As part of our pledge to bring change to Illinois, we pledged to work alongside advocacy groups and grassroots partners to hold our elected officials accountable to their campaign promises. And the most urgent need right now is a desire for true change in policing in Chicago and around the nation. And we often hear the phrase defund the police, and we know that phrase is more than just a hashtag. We know, for instance, that Chicago's policing budget equals approximately 40% of all expenditures in the city. And grassroots in Chicago and all around the nation are showing up in protest to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, and countless others. We must rise up to say that Black Lives Matter. And in Chicago, we have a long history of police brutality. We know that budgets are moral documents and they reflect our values. We spend more than $600 per resident on policing in Chicago in 2020, which is nearly 3 times as much as the city spent per resident in 1964. So we're calling on others, including Indivisibles around Chicagoland area, to look at their own city budgets with their mayors to find out how much is actually spent on policing versus social services, such as community programs, education, and other initiatives and resources to address the root causes of violence. And we know that the violence in our city is a public health crisis. On top of the pandemic that we have right now, we believe that our country could greatly help restore trust between the community and the police if we shifted that funding from the police budgets to the community. So we're interested in looking and talking to others about that issue. But today, we're very happy to be here every week talking about how we're going to move forward in this moment towards Election Day. And we're glad to have two guests today, which I am going to introduce. Our first guest, we have Cook County Clerk Carol Ammons, and I want to point out that she was a state rep in Illinois. Some of the issues that she worked on as a rep include public safety and public health, including abolishing the death sentence. And we know that Clerk Yarbrough is the first African-American woman to hold this position in Cook County and she holds the keys to the entire process of electoral work in Cook County, our largest county in Illinois. We know that she also has presided over the first ever voting in Cook County Jail, where thousands of people are able to register to vote and vote. And we're happy to also point out the work that she's done to make this year as inclusive as possible, including creating ballots in 12 different languages. So we're lucky to have her today. We are also very grateful to have Rep. Carol Ammons here, who is running for re-election for state representative in the 103rd district in Illinois. And she has a long career fighting for equality and justice. She was the first African-American woman elected to the 103rd district in 2014. And she's done so much work, including passing, raising the minimum wage and helping to balance the budgets. We know that she's an activist at heart, and we're very, very glad to hear from her today First, I would love to have Miss Karen Yarbrough on to talk about this moment where we are celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage. But what is not talked about enough is the role of Black women in that fight. We're glad to have you here, Cook County Clerk Karen Yarbrough, and we would love to have you have a statement and talk a little bit about voting rights and the role of women, especially Black women. And we're going to put you off of mute first.
And thank you so much for allowing me to be with you this evening. And if someone would put up my PowerPoint, I'm going to get through that very quickly. I've been asked today to speak about the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage. Now, 100 is a very specific number, and it's certainly worth pausing here to in 2020, because 100 years after the first federal election in which all white women were allowed to vote. Well, we know that women were voting in some places, next slide, before 1920, and still denied the right to vote decades later in others. The further we move away, next slide, from our own history, the more it loses the individual edges of the multifaceted diamond that we polish. We see it as a finished object, and the individual stories are swallowed up by the lengths of time and the limits of human bandwidth. Next slide. I want you to imagine yourself that you're stepping into a time machine. Now, this slide talks about women, our place. And I know Carol has heard this before, and she's probably said it before, but as a former legislator, we always said a woman's place is in the House, the House of Representatives. But, they trust us as women, didn't think we were worthy to vote. Next slide, please. This slide I thought was particularly interesting because this was 1917, and it kind of showed you what was going on in the United States in terms of full suffrage, presidential suffrage, primary suffrage, and no suffrage. And so mostly in the southern states, with the exception of Arkansas, they were trying to get their act together, I guess, because they were only allowing women to vote during the primaries. Next slide, please. There was a lot of distinction between white women and Black women in terms of wanting to have the vote. While white women felt like, they could do this by themselves, but it would certainly be better if they did it with Black women. But once Black women did get the right to vote, white women were concerned that since there were so many Black women, that if they voted as a block, then they may lose their person for the election. So some of the white suffragettes, they just did not want to include Black women. Next slide, please. But there was Sojourner Truth. And as I look at these women, because Sojourner Truth, she was born in 1797 or something. And when I think about her, I think about, oh my goodness, and she was thinking about, not only was she thinking about equal rights for Blacks, but absolutely equal rights for women. And she gave her famous extemporaneous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" at this Ohio Women's Rights Convention. And we remember her for that. Next slide. I just finished reading a book very recently on Ida B. Wells. The name of that book is Ida, A Sword Amongst Lions by Paula Gettings. And I was really struck by this book. I had no idea that Ida did all of the things that she did. An investigative reporter, she owned a newspaper, she wrote countless articles to raise the awareness of a woman's plight, but she also was known for drawing a focus on the lynchings that were going on in the South of the Black women and Black men. In this particular clip, you see that Ida is front and center in this clip, and this would actually happen in Cook County. It was going to be a segregated parade. The Black women were going to be in the back and the white women were going to be up front. But Ida said, either I go with you and I march up front, or I won't go at all. And she said, and I quote, "I'm doing this for the future benefit of my whole race." And so you see her front and center. This parade was a great success. And this was at the start of Woodrow Wilson's presidency. And it was overshadowed by this historic event. Does that remind you of another historic event where the Women's March marched and kind of overshadowed someone else's inauguration? I think you know, it's in our time. So here we are in 2020. Next slide. And I'm honored and humbled to be here. We've come a long way, baby. I know you all remember the Virginia Slims commercial. Next slide. And as your county clerk, I'm the first woman elected to this position, and we'll be celebrating our 190th anniversary next year. So I'm also the first African American and probably the first non-Chicagoan to run our suburban elections in over 100 years. This slide I thought was particularly interesting because the women had to appeal directly to the voters, and guess who the voters were? Men. What a concept. Next slide. So we all stand on the shoulders of the Harriet Tubmans, the Sojourner Truths, the Ida B. Wells, the Mary Church Terrells, the Ella Bakers, the Rosa Parks, and Angela Davis. I don't know where our country will be in 100 years. Maybe we will have moved to the space colonies by then. I won't be here, and you probably won't be here either, but our hope for a better tomorrow must always endure. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Clerk Yarbrough. And we're going to come back and circle around and ask a few questions. But first, I would love to get Rep. Ammons on, because in this moment, many people are saying, well, we should just give up because there's no hope in our government. Our government isn't doing enough for us anyway, and to hell with these masks. but also we're looking at not only women actually voting this year, but stepping up and leading in their communities, and not only just leading in their communities, but actually running for office. I would love to hear your take on what Clerk Yarbrough presented right now, and I'll hand you the mic. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lenny, for having me on. And I'm taking notes from our very able clerk up in Cook County, my great friend, Miss Karen Yarbrough. I enjoy being with her every chance I get. And so this moment, as she so perfectly framed, is really going to ask this fundamental question that was asked, I believe, during the women's suffrage movement as well. Is there room under this tent for all of us? Is there room for Black women? Will we listen to Black women's voices? Will we make sure that their agenda is part of the agenda? I think as she described the historical record, I had many of the same names that she mentioned, and the work that they attempted to do to get not only women's suffrage, but we as Black women cannot separate ourselves from our Black men and our Black children, because the suffrage movement that we're in right now asks the question, whether we will continue to live in an America that wantonly kills our Black brothers and sisters. That's really a question that not only white women need to ask themselves, but all people should ask that question and respond to the moment that we're in today, similar to that one of the 1920s. I think what Clerk Yarbrough shared with us is the real dirty secret of the women's suffrage movement. And we've not really dealt with that. Like so many other areas in the United States, we've not dealt with this issue of race that continues to emerge each time we as Black people are attempting to act upon what is supposedly constitutionally available to us, but is unfortunately in application denied. So Black women found ourselves pulled in two different directions in 1920. And here we are again being pulled similarly in multiple directions away from what is fundamentally the problem of America, and that is the question of race and the role it plays in policy and the role it plays in getting, in many cases, our rights to be implemented. So Black women have really tried to fight on multiple fronts. And in the celebration of the 100 years, I remember as a girl, and I'll just share this, when I was in school, like many of us, we learned of the women's movement, but we didn't learn anything about Ida B. Wells.
That's right.
Nothing. We learned nothing about Harriet Tubman's role in women's suffrage. We didn't learn about Rosa Parks' roles or even Sojourner Truth beyond a very smidgen of what their contribution to America is. And so because of that, we have raised generations of people based on a male-dominant Eurocentric worldview. And that worldview has tainted what I believe needs to be the worldview, which is a multicultural, dynamic worldview. And we haven't gotten there yet. And so as Ms. Yarbrough just said, something that is critical to understanding the importance of suffrage, the importance of the right to vote, and how that right to vote really impacts our decision-making, our policies, our juries. I served as a chair of our jury commission in Champaign County, and so did my husband even after me, who was trying our best to get more African Americans just simply in the jury pool. And because we understand that the jury pool is made up by registered voters, that is where we see our work needs to be in promoting registration, getting people out to vote, and making sure they understand the value and the importance to a balanced criminal justice system is all tied together with the right to vote and the selection of juries. And so in American history, both of those things have been consistently denied. And unfortunately, we have people in today's time seeking to roll us back to pre-1920. So I hope that out of this discussion, people will walk away. What do I want people to walk away with during this discussion is that you only get as much representation as you are willing to fight for.
That's right.
If you do not register to vote, if you do not participate in a census, if you throw away the jury card when they tell you that they need you to come and serve as a civic duty on a jury, then you are undermining your own existence. And that has been unfortunately posited by so many people saying, oh, it doesn't matter, or voting don't matter. If I, at the time that I am in the General Assembly, was not in the General Assembly, we would not have removed all of the barriers to people's driver's licenses this last session. People who were losing their licenses because they didn't have enough money to pay for parking tickets, which means they lose their jobs, which means then they lose their housing. So if I'm not in the General Assembly at this critical moment, does that bill get passed? Maybe. Maybe it wasn't even a thought for someone to do that work. When Karen was in the General Assembly, do we get the jury diversification? Do we get the traffic stop data? Do we get all of these things that her representation brought to the state of Illinois? I think our representation is critical. So as we start to celebrate women's suffrage, the women including white women especially, must ask and answer the critical question: will you continue to support an ideology that diminishes the contributions of African American women and African Americans in general? Will you continue to support an ideology that allows for the wanton murder of unarmed people in your society? Will you continue to support an ideology that disenfranchises people when it comes to juries and the right to defend yourself in court? Those questions must be answered truthfully by our sisters who are not African American, regardless of what ethnicity you might be. Our voices silenced will also give them the right to continue. And so I challenge us to face the history, the real history of the women's suffrage movement, as our clerk just laid out very clearly, that we have so much work to do around the issue of race and sex and the rights that come along with that. We have to address those issues as a collective body, and I do look forward to us doing it.
And that was amazing. And I would love to hear Clerk Yarbrough kind of chime in at the end of that as well. I know that there's a lot to talk about, but
there sure is. There sure is. You know, I'm a lifelong learner, and you know, Carol was real clear on, you know, if not her now, then who? And would these things get done in terms of policy issues? I just read an article in the New York Times recently that really hit the nail on the head. You know, as an African American, we have our own set of problems, you know, within our race. And then we have the problems with outside of our race. But the reason why we, you know, we talk in terms of, you know, first I think we were colored, then we were Negroes, then we were African Americans. I mean, they don't know what to do with us, you know, but there's always been this problem. What shall we do with the Negro? I just read this article though. The woman, she's the great granddaughter of Edmund Pettus. Did anybody read this article on her race colored skin? I was just, I had to stop before I, you know, when I just read that first sentence, race colored skin. If you could just think in terms of, hasn't been so long ago, we didn't own our bodies as women, okay? We could be married, but if our so-called masters wanted to cohabitate with us and rape us, there was no love lost. I mean, you know, we were property. And, you know, and I think in terms of slavery, and a lot of groups have been enslaved, there's no question about that. But this was chattel slavery, and there's a difference. So there's so much, Lenny, you said this, you know, we were talking before, there's so much to talk about here, but getting back to Carol's point, you know, we have to educate the young people who are involved in the marches and what have you. We didn't even get that education. I know I didn't get it when I was in school. So I've gotten it since I've become an adult, but we have to educate our youth, both Black and white and Hispanic, and, you know, the raw, unadulterated truth about where we've come from in this country. And, you know, there's plenty of blame to go around. There's no question about that. This country was built on the backs of Blacks and lots of people, anybody they could subjugate. Okay. I remember when I was in graduate school, my professor, he wanted us to Columbus and have a trial. Bring him up on charges. Bring Columbus up on charges because Columbus was not a nice man. Okay. Now this isn't about the Italian race. This is about somebody who got lost and, you know, subjugated a bunch of people, used them, abused them, brought, I mean, there's all kinds of things. And when you go to the islands and you hear from those folks and how they herald Columbus, it just floors me, but it's because they don't know. They just do not know. So a serious conversation about race, are we ready to go there? I mean, I'm not so sure because it's brutal, it's ugly, but I think until you face it, then we can, say, okay, that happened, and, plenty of blame to go around. But here's where we are today, and how can we embrace one another and deal with the issues at hand? We are in a precarious place today, and there are a lot of hurting people. They're Black, they're white, they're Hispanic, they're Asian, they're Native American. They are hurting right now. And we're talking about the right to vote. There's still some people who, after they're incarcerated and they serve their debt in some of these states and they come out of corrections, they still do not have the right to vote. That, in my view, is wrong. That is wrong. That is a wrong that we need to right. So there's plenty of work to do and plenty of work to go around. And anybody who says they're bored, give me a call. You can join me with fighting on all these fronts. And in communities, there's all kinds of issues. There's homelessness. There's, these mental health challenges. There's drug abuse. It's everything. It's everything. So, there are a few of us who want to do the work, and there are others that go home in the evenings from the jobs they still have. And they pull the curtain down, they prop their feet up, they have their glass of wine, and they watch TV or whatever they do. And they're unconcerned until it happens to them.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
I'm done.
It absolutely speaks to the moment. I mean, we did not know 5 months ago how this pandemic was going to hit us in our daily lives. I myself have lost 2 friends to COVID. I have a small business, and I see businesses closing down all around me, nonprofits folding. But we also see things like statues coming down, and sports teams changing their names, and beyond that, we see that there is going to be a ballot out in a couple months. And so that's what we always have to do. Whenever I feel like I just can't go on, I have to think to myself, what is it that I could do? What is the one more thing that I could do? What is the one more conversation that I can have that will help strengthen our democracy? Because that is really what it's all about. People want to blame the guy that's in the White House right now for everything that's happening. But, there's no denying that this pandemic has really flipped us upside down. Yes. We need resources here in the state of Illinois, right? And we're looking for leaders to help us through this pandemic. So those are the 3 things that we are going to do as Indivisibles. Is we are going to go to vote in November, but we also want to do it in a way that is safe. We want our elections to be secure. Donald Trump on Twitter said that he's thinking about changing the elections. I don't know if you're up on that. I try not to listen to him.
Not going to happen.
Exactly. Like what is that? So we just have to think, we have to keep our eyes on the prize, which is November, which is the reason why we're here to talk, to actually get some action steps behind what we need to do, the things that we need to talk to our friends and neighbors about. And I'll leave it to either Clerk Yarbrough or Rep. Ammons to go for to answer the question, like, what is it that we can do today, right now? And how do we tell others to come along with us?
So I think Clerk Yarbrough just really pointed out a few things that are really critical. Now, for the first time, when Karen took over, for the first time in the state of Illinois, we had 2 Black clerks. She was the first female, and my husband's the first male clerk. Now, what an interesting dynamic this is. For our community, and I believe 76 years had passed since there had been even a Democrat elected, and 200 years, because we celebrated the 200th year of the state of Illinois, no Black person had ever served in the position as clerk. And let's talk about that just slightly, why that is so critical. To break a glass ceiling like that in a community like this downstate has not come easily. My husband and I have received death threats. We've received hostile mail from Republican congressmen. We've literally have people suggesting that all of a sudden a Black man is in control of the elections, that vote by mail is not going to work and you can't trust it. So the deep, very deep, racialized lens that has colored this country has to be broken. And I'm going to suggest that those who are best positioned to break that white supremacist racialized lens that has colored all of our engagement at one point or another, that lens needs to be broken by white females. That's the truth. See, that has, white women must, do as Miss Karen said, how about reading Ida B. Wells' book? And how about we take a moment and read Democracy in Chains so that we can understand that what you're looking at right now from the GOP is carefully crafted and has been developed in think tanks for a very long time, since Brown versus Board of Education. And the response that we got after Brown versus Board was similar to what my husband is experiencing as a new clerk. Instead of allowing the integration of children so all children would have access to the same quality education, they said, we're going to close all the schools. And in some states, they closed the schools for 5 years, leaving Black children with no resources and no education. That is the kind of cycle that we've kind of recycled from generation to generation. So when it came to the right to vote, same recycle. When it came to the right to serve on juries, same kind of recycling, right? When it came to Black electeds coming to lead communities, all of a sudden we got to come only from a Black district. We can't lead other non-white, non-Black districts. So this recycling of this undercurrent of racial superiority has to be broken. And it has to be broken by the consciousness and awakening of white women, and all of us then can pull in the same direction. But if we continue to have to fight around this concept of whether police have the right unfettered to murder Black people, we cannot walk in the same path, because we as Black women cannot throw away our Black men and Black children in the same way that Ida B. Wells and other Black women during suffrage movement time said that I can't separate my Blackness from my femaleness.
Right, right.
And until we're willing to have the movement the real movement where we are saying, okay, white women, it is not fair that you take 50 to 60% of the minority contracting because you're white women. It's not fair. That's not fair. We need to look at that. And so in some cases, when we're talking about access to capital, it's white women. When we're talking about access to contracting, it's white women. And at no point have I sat into a meeting where white women said, okay, enough is enough. We need to be fair to all of these minority groups, and having 1% Black representation is not appropriate, right? So we have to begin to really be true allies to each other and study the history so that we are not repeating the same mantra that was repeated generation after generation before us. And so my clarion call to my sisters, right, by gender, to our sisters who want to be allies, is that allyship should not come at the consequence of me having to give away my Blackness in order to represent our allyship. And it does not come at the expense of me ignoring the true history of our country and trying to literally correct that so that we don't have another generation of people who grow up with this idea and concept that if we let Black people in, then we won't have 100%, and that's not right. I mean, you could just imagine some of the conversations we run into trying to pass equitable legislation that will bring equity to communities. It is amazing what some people think about this concept of equity in practice. And so I'm working over and over and over again with my community. I'm in the Women's Caucus, which is a lot more white women in our caucus, and I'm constantly sharing with them, as Yarbrough shared with us today. It is time for us to accept the real history of this country and do as South Africa did, even if it wasn't as successful as I'd like it to be, is to have that come to Jesus moment or a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that we can really deal with the truth here and stop repeating the lies and the mythology that produce this inequity that we're experiencing right now. So I'll stop there and let you all just continue with your questions as you want.
Thank you, Rep. Ammons. Clerk Yarbrough, do you have anything to add to that? And I know that Rose is itching to ask a question after you respond to Rep. Ammons.
I want to talk just a bit about ballot security. I know it's a big topic and it's a concern for Indivisible Illinois. And we can debate about, the most secure methods are. Illinois law requires us to use the two-method system, the optical scan and the paper backup. The new equipment that we're using in Cook County is safer and more transparent than ever. There's an individual paper ballot created by electronic ballot marker. It's reviewed by the voter before they feed it into the scanner. The voting cart keeps the paper ballot secure and technologically secure the image of the front and the back of the ballot. Now, people want to know about the mail voting. This is so strange that we're having to have this conversation about mail voting. We've been doing this. We've been doing this for a very long time. This is not our first rodeo with, mail-in ballots. We just, in Illinois, we've expanded it so you don't have to have an excuse. In some states, you do have to have an excuse in order to use what they call, we call it the mail ballot, and they call it the, what is the other one? Whatever they call it. I've listened to Trump, so don't listen to Trump, okay? You listen to Trump, and you listen to Trump and then you get confused and you're like, wait a minute, isn't that the same thing? Now he uses it, but I guess it's not good enough for everybody else. But anyway, we use signature verification on all mail ballots, and we have teams of sworn election judges to administer the counting of these votes. Despite all the naysayers, the system works. Why? Because it does. We've been doing this. Like I said, this is not our first rodeo. We're encouraging people, everybody, if they would just please, and we just sent out, I think, 1.6 million applications for a mail-in ballot. I got mine in the mail, but I had already signed up. But we're encouraging everybody, request it now. Don't wait. Just do it now. Now, there is a question about the United States Post Office. I would just encourage you to contact your federal representatives and make sure the post office is committed to delivering the mail. I'm listening again to that man. My friend calls him the error, ERROR, in the White House. So I won't even call his name anymore. I'm not going to do that. But anyway, despite his efforts to discourage mail voting, we are encouraging people to vote by mail. Our last election, we see it's trending that way anyway, that people vote early and they vote by mail. And we want people to do it more this time than they did last time. So I'm going to do everything I can. We dodged a bullet in the primary. There was some thought or movement or whatever you want to say, conversation about putting the election off because of COVID-19. If we had done that, I'm not sure when we would have had the election. When would we have had the election? we needed to have the election. When we did, I went around to all of the early voting sites. I spoke with all the judges, and we had ordered about $30,000 worth of PPE. Guess what? It didn't show up. But you know, I'm a woman. Okay, I'm a woman and we know how to get stuff done, right? So when I went around to the polling places, I saw the human spirit in full view, and that was the judges brought PPE to the polling places. They wanted to be safe. They brought masks, they brought the wipes, they brought, I mean, I'm like, wow, look at this. And we didn't lose not one person, okay? We did not one person who was a judge. After the election, you know, we always send out a document asking them, you know, how the election went. It's a survey. But this time I decided I wanted to talk to the judges. And so over a period of 3 days, we had 6 meetings. We had over 600 people to sign in. They became the advocates for judges. And they told us what went wrong, what went right. And look, if we could get through that election, I know we can get through the November election, and we're going to have everything we need so that we have a safe election on election day. But I'm encouraging people, like I'm going to do, to vote by mail. Okay?
I gotta share with Karen. We're encouraging people to vote by mail, and everyone in Indivisible should help us spread that message.
Yes.
We saw something unprecedented in March. That outside of Cook County, many of the clerks recorded that they lost literally polling locations during early voting. So in Champaign County, we had election judges who did not want to serve because most of them are older and more senior. And for the obvious reason, they were certainly more at risk for COVID-19. So we lost polling locations like the day before the last day to vote, right? Which was really challenging for my brand new husband clerk. And of course, the Republicans are trying to utilize whatever they can to justify why he shouldn't be clerk, right? But you got a pandemic happening, you losing election judges, you're losing polling locations. All of this is happening at the same time. Equipment failures, all of these things are just normal practices. The equipment stuff happens during all elections. But boy, throw in a pandemic, throw in seniors, throw in polling locations like churches who closed right before the final day to vote, and you have a significant problem on your hands. So we still made it happen during a pandemic, that we had an election in Champaign County with a brand new staff of which no one was in the office more than 6 months at that time. Wow. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
All the staff were literally summarily moved out of the clerk's office. My husband didn't fire a single one of them, but they wouldn't work for him, right? And so lost all of the institutional knowledge, a dang on pandemic, and election day polling locations closing, and you lose your election judges, and you need to run an election. So if we want democracy to work, vote by mail has been happening since the Civil War.
Yeah.
So there is no reason that we would listen to anything coming from the GOP when it comes to vote by mail. Many of them know they've been voting by mail themselves for decades. So they are traditionally making the slash and burn kind of pitch to the voters. But we visited Colorado during their primary just a few weeks ago. We went out to Colorado so we can witness their vote by mail process, where you see upwards of 95% of their voters vote by mail. And they've been doing it for 7 years. So if there was any sign that it didn't work, as Karen said, look, all of this equipment is built. We have checks and balances, we have audits, we have paper, we have all the things that most countries don't have to run an election. And yet someone is trying to convince us that vote by mail is not secure. We should at every chance, every indivisible person on this call and every person watching by Facebook, do your homework, reach out to your clerk, talk to your clerks, talk to trusted people who vote by mail, and spread the message so that people don't get to November and we know this pandemic is a real deal. Yes. And we know people are dying. Let us not do that. Let's simply look at how we can securely vote by mail in our community. And Karen has demonstrated that it's possible. And we've demonstrated that it's possible in Champaign County, even in the midst of a pandemic.
Okay, I see I have some questions here. And I'm trying to answer that. They're in the group chat.
I see that.
Yeah, so do you have enough election judges for November 3rd? Thankfully, the schools will be closed, and we are seeking more youth to step up to become election judges. We have a number of them, but we'll have more. And we are combing the bushes looking for them. This whole thing about the post office, I know about the concern that everybody has about the post office. Let's again reach out to our federal partners and tell them that, you know, we're not having this. Okay. Next, are we going to have a secure drop box at every early voting site for drop-offs? Absolutely. And I'm also advocating for to have them also at the post offices or the libraries. Everybody, you know, the library, most communities do have libraries. So we're going to see about that. And then question number 4, would you help advocate including 5% of the vote by mail in the 5% retabulation? Right now, they are not audited at all. I will share that with our head of elections. The next one is, Karen, will voters receive an email or some sort of acknowledgement once the ballot has been sent out? They will not only receive that, but they will receive, they will know when we get their ballot back in. That to me is really, really important because, you know, if you send it in, you want to know that we got it, and we want you to know that too. Joy talked about vote early and vote often. How do we protect from Chicago machine corruption? You know, I know people say that and what have you, but we haven't seen any of that kind of thing. I think that's just an adage that they've used over the years and what have you. But I do want people to vote early, okay? And I want everybody to vote. Let's see here. I got asked by one of my volunteers from Illinois, if you request an absentee ballot but do not vote on it, can you still vote in person? You absolutely can. They will be able to see that you did not turn it in, and we're not going to be, if you vote on election day, you're not going to get a chance to vote twice, okay? If that's what people are thinking, that's just not going to happen. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, nothing.
That's it.
Well, I wanted to thank both of our guests. We have Cook County Clerk Clerk Yarbrough and Karen Yarbrough. And I see your name. Your name is like right there. Clerk Karen Yarbrough, and also Rep Carol Ammons. And we are so grateful for this time that we spent together. We know that there are other questions that are coming our way, so we would love to pass those up to you and then get those answers to our members when we have them. I wanted to, again, thank you. We must look to our leaders in our communities, especially our Black women leaders like Karen Yarbrough and Carol Ammons. See, now you are all going to be joined like at the hip. I'm going to have to say one and the other both at the same time. Because you're a pair. I think that this connection between Cook County and Champaign County is so strong. We need to do that. We need to build alliances and we need to build bridges because we are all in this together. And that is the only way that we are going to win. So thank you so much.
Agreed. And thank you for the invitation. Let's do this again.
I would love it. We'd love to we're going to give you snaps now.
Okay.
If I can thank Karen and thank you all for having us on. Let me just say that the members, certainly of the Illinois House Democratic Women's Caucus, we intend to make our efforts that we did in our spring special session, we intend to make them permanent so that clerks like Clerk Yarbrough and our clerk here in Champaign County will be able to build consistently so that people will be comfortable and accustomed to voting by mail for future elections, and we will prove that Mr. Other Guy is absolutely wrong when it comes to how vote by mail can make sure that people can continue to participate in their democracy. So it is critical. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. It is absolutely the way. We Indivisibles, this is what we are working for, is to strengthen our democracy. And we believe that an engaged and informed electorate is the way that we are going to save it. I want to now introduce Rose Colacino, who's our Indivisible Illinois 2020 coordinator. And I will pass it to you, Rose. Thank you.
Okay, goodness gracious. I need to follow that act. All right. I feel like throwing my remarks out the window if it was open. I just want to say how grateful I am and how important it is for us to listen. And I think I myself do plenty of talking, and there's so many instances that I can bring up just from my upbringing and my experience to speak to what Rep. Ammons was talking about. I can talk to you for an hour and ask your advice, but don't know if that is appropriate right now. I am going to tell you that we are working hard. We will continue working hard. Last week, we had two other powerful women on the panel. We had Angela Lang, who works for an organization called Block in Wisconsin, in the Milwaukee community, following along with really the Stacey Abrams model, ensuring that the community does have the opportunity to vote, and not just one stop, get out the vote, but really working with them for years. It's just so surprising she's such a young woman. We also had the opportunity to work with Deborah Harris, actually made a presentation to her team Action Now in Austin and some other neighborhoods, and it's all of this is so very educational for me. And Clerk Yarbrough, I know that Rep. Ammons had to leave, but I implore you to please come. Oh, she's still there. Yes, I thought you had to go at 8. I'm so pleased that you took the time today. I really hope that this is an ongoing thing. I know my opportunity in speaking to Deborah Harris's group at Action Now, I can't just show up and leave. I want to continue the relationship. I want to give you some quick background on what we are doing at Indivisible Illinois, and would appreciate direction and advice. So I started out being a nerd for a long time. 2016, I was reading everything I could about election security at that time, because I knew that the Illinois voter registration database had been hacked, and so I started studying up. And then around 2018, I became the election security voters' rights person for Indivisible Illinois. And I was really pushing with my team hand-marked paper ballots. And I had the opportunity, actually, Clerk Yarbrough, to speak to your CTO. I come from a corporate sales background, and what we do is interview and talk to people. So I had the opportunity to talk to him. I had actually the opportunity to speak to some other people in your staff. It was very enlightening. And we're a big state, so we also took a trip to Peoria. And I spoke with the very informative Thomas Bride. And I look forward, hopefully, to speaking to Clerk Ammons. So we are trying to educate ourselves as much as possible. And roundabout March or so, it seems like forever, right? When the pandemic hit, we did switch gears and we did pivot toward mail-in ballots. And so we worked with our representatives. We worked with Julie Morrison to push the expanded vote by mail legislation. And at this point now, we're working with any clerk that will work with us to make sure we implement this expanded law effectively. And thanks for mentioning that it does expire in January, because let us know, we have to start working on the new legislation probably soon. But we continue to fight, and we have a vote by mail task force, and it is made up of a number of different committees because there's so much work to do. But the committee that I'm most proud of is the diversity committee. And actually Kim, and I think she was on for a while, Nikita, are on, there's Kim, hi Kim, are on our diversity committee, or we're on their diversity committee. And we are trying to make sure that everybody has the right to vote. We are learning from people like men too, Christian Perry and Jose Luis Torres from the Latinx community, that one of the things I'm pushing is what you said, and you said it so much better, Clerk Yarbrough, thank you. If I can just bring a recording with me. yes, we want everyone to please vote by mail is safe. We want everybody to do it early. We want everybody to do it online. I am part of that select group that is automatically going to get their applications, but I feel good that you did it too, Clerk Yarbrough. I've already ordered mine. I'm not going to wait. I've already requested it. So I really implore everyone in the audience, please, if you haven't done it yet, go to the great site of Clerk Yarbrough or the Chicago Board of Elections. That's where I vote. And online, require your application, request your application, and let's get it done. I have my friends on from Wisconsin. They've also educated me. We don't want what happened in April in Wisconsin to happen in this monumental election in November. So we go forward. I just would love to brainstorm with everybody because I understand from my community leaders, my friends in the African American community and the Latinx community, that sometimes it's not so easy for their community to apply for that vote by mail online. So we have to be creative. I know we have one member that is actually printing off, an Indivisible member. She is printing off applications, dispersing those in a plastic bag with stamps. And also we have talked to Deborah Harris about perhaps having kiosks. We know that in some African-American communities, there's not strong Wi-Fi. So perhaps, I know the clock is ticking, but perhaps we bring our tablets and so forth. We have talked about having door tags. So I asked everybody out there to help us. We need more volunteers because we have, what, Kelly, 96 days. So we move forward. And again, I'm throwing a lot of these remarks out, but I do want to say that we just hope we can continue this dialogue. And with that, I am going to turn it around to our friends in Wisconsin, because as critically important as we know our own state is in Illinois, because of a lot of reasons, the fair tax, the great Congress folks like Lauren Underwood and Marie Newman, we know that we all in Illinois have to vote. I think though also Wisconsin has such incredible significance this year because I've been saying it since 2018, and that's when I had the opportunity to canvass with the great women of Block, that Wisconsin will decide who the next leader of the free world will be. And that's quite a task. And the two women that I'm going to introduce right now are up for it. They have been working incredibly hard, and I think they have sacrificed. And if they can just continue going forward, we just have a few more miles to go, ladies. But with that, I want to introduce Ellen Campbell. She is one of the leaders of the Wisconsin Voter Protection Hotline. And I had the great privilege of serving on the hotline for the April elections in Wisconsin, where we saw those horrendous lines. And you know, that's why what Clerk Yarbrough was saying, we don't want those long lines. We want vote by mail. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Ellen, and I would like her to explain how we could help. And without further ado, Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you guys so much. It's a real honor to be here with such an amazing panel tonight in particular. As a native Chicagoan, I can't even tell you how excited I am about the things you guys are doing to make it safe to vote in Illinois. I'm here because I'm the Deputy Voter Protection Director for the Wisconsin Democratic Party. We are currently pursuing various initiatives to recruit poll workers and poll watchers, as well as staff our hotline. To the points that we've discussed already on this call, I'd like to bring your attention to two provisions of Wisconsin law that are going to be a real problem for us and why we need poll observers so badly. The first one is that it's completely legal under Wisconsin law to challenge anyone you know or suspect is not a valid Wisconsin voter. And so if proper challenge procedure is followed, that person should be able to vote, but it is possible that upon challenge, they'll feel intimidated and leave their polling site if they don't know the rules. Reasons why you might not be an eligible voter in Wisconsin. This means that if you suspect someone is not a US citizen, you can challenge their right to vote. If you suspect someone is a felon, you can challenge their right to vote. You don't need actual proof, you just need to suspect. This is a problem. We need poll watchers in order to combat it. The second thing that I'd like to highlight is the requirement for certification on absentee ballots in Wisconsin. You need both your address, your signature, your witness's signature and your witness's address. If any of the three are missing, then your ballot won't be counted. If this is identified in time, you can reach out to the voter and they can correct it. If we have poll watchers, we can try and reach out to people before it's too late to make sure that they're not disenfranchised without their knowledge. So there are both in-person opportunities for any young people you know that like to be part of this fight. I do think Wisconsin is a very important state this election season. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. And in addition, we have remote opportunities, both sort of phone banking through municipal clerks in order to get more information about early vote and curbside options for voters, and drop boxes. We want every municipal clerk in Wisconsin to have a drop box. We want to encourage them to know that this is an option for them. Can't tell you how much I love what I heard on this call about drop boxes. And yeah, so if you want to get involved, we'll send you our trainings and would love to see you there. Thank you. Oh, I see a question from Clerk Yarbrough. Yeah, there's the Republican challengers, given the expansiveness of the challenge rules under Wisconsin law, is something that we're very concerned about, particularly if we can't get people in there to counter them and make sure that the rules are followed, and that the voters know those rules. But one of the things that I'm doing is I'm here trying to get you guys to push to your networks to help me find some more poll observers so I can send people in to counter them. Because if I don't know what's happening, I can't do anything about it. Now we are pushing our hotline so that voters can call if they have an issue. We are trying to get that out farther and wider, and we are spending money to promote it, but nothing can replace a good poll observer for letting me know that there's an excessively aggressive challenger on the ground in a polling site. We are putting people on the ground in Milwaukee for the August 11th election in order to try and figure out our operation for November. And we'll take anyone that you want to send to us, and anyone who wants to drive north. Poll watchers in Wisconsin do not need to be Wisconsin residents.
Any more questions for Ellen?
All right, and I will pass it on to my extremely able colleague, Heba.
Yes, thank you so much, Ellen. I just want to do some brief introduction for Heba. So Heba is our out-of-state coordinator. Essentially what she does is coordinate individuals such as ourselves, out-of-state folks that want to help in Wisconsin. So the floor this time is yours, Heba. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as always, such a pleasure to be on this call. Definitely a highlight of my week to be able to hear from so many just informed and really passionate advocates for voting rights and for our democracy. So thank you so much, Rose, for the introduction. My name is Heba, and I'm the digital organizing director for the Wisconsin Coordinated Campaign. And on top of everything that Ellen has shared and other folks have shared about opportunities to volunteer, I want to mention that ahead of our August 11th primary, we are hosting a really important weekend of action. This is going to be a weekend where we are primarily focusing on phone banking, because we know that's the most effective tool that we have in our toolbox right now to reach out to voters, to make sure they have the information they need to know how to vote safely and what their options are ahead of Election Day. We'll be engaging in conversations that are talking to voters about what issues matter most to them, but also making sure that if they requested an absentee ballot, they know how to return it and they know how to fill it out properly so that it gets counted and it reaches their clerk on time. So these conversations are going to be vital. We'll be reaching out to thousands of voters during that weekend, and these conversations are often how we feed voters into the voter protection hotline, rather, so that they can get the help that they need. So all of the systems that we have in place are very intentional and symbiotic, and so appreciative to our colleagues at the voter protection team, because they really do the hard work of making sure that voters get the very specific answers that they need and the support that they need. So if you're interested in reaching out to voters, particularly during August 8th and 9th, please sign up to volunteer with us. You can visit wisdems.org/toolkit, and we'll put that link in the Facebook Live and also in any other places that you all might visit, but you can visit wisdems.org/toolkit to sign up. And we do have ongoing events as well. And after this primary is over, we're going to kick it into even higher gear to make sure that folks who requested their ballots know when to return them, folks who haven't yet, make sure that they get those ballot requests in, and that we're still having conversations with people to let them know that, you know, voting for Democrats is how we're going to put our country back on the right path forward. So that's what I have tonight. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to working with many of you during the primary and beyond.
Thank you so much, Hebba. Any questions for Hebba? Sign up and volunteer, please. We need you. Lenny, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Heba. Thank you, Ellen, and the Wisconsin Dems for always coming to join us on Thursdays at 7 o'clock here at Indivisible, Illinois. We believe that we can win. I say that with sincerity because I know that there's momentum out there. I know that everybody who actually marched at the Women's March, I know that you're talking about these important issues right now. We're not just boots on the ground, we're actually organizing, we're phone banking, we're texting, and there's something to do every single day of the week from now until Election Day. We want to, at this moment in time, make you look up to Wisconsin, because Wisconsin, it's only a couple more weeks before their elections, and they need every hour of your time that is possible, even if you can just commit to 2 hours between now and Election Day. It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. So thank you all for being here. Please find your local Indivisible group. You can go to indivisible.org and put in your zip code, and you'll see many of the groups that are in your area. And if you don't have a group in your area, please reach out, because we would love to help you set one up. Thank you again for joining us, and we wish you well. Take care and stay safe. We'll see you next week.